Accessible Transportation Strategic Plan Policy Advisory Committee meeting. We have a brief video to show you.
Due to COVID-19, this meeting will be conducted as a Zoom meeting pursuant to the provisions of the Governor's Executive Order N-2920, which suspends certain requirements of the Brown Act. This meeting is being live-streamed on the CCTA website. The chair will call upon members, staff, and other speakers by name. Please speak clearly and state your name before giving comments or remarks. Persons participating via Zoom with their cameras enabled are reminded that their activities are visible to viewers. Members participating by Zoom wishing to speak should physically raise their hand and unmute their mic when called upon. Members should remute their mics when done speaking. Citizens participating by Zoom wishing to speak should use the Raise Hand feature or dial *9 if participating via phone, and the chair or staff will call upon them at the appropriate time. Citizens will have 3 minutes to speak. A 30-second warning will be provided. After 3 minutes, staff will lower their hand and mute their mic. Participants via phone will be called upon by the last 4 digits of their phone number. It is requested that public speakers state their names and organization, but providing such information is voluntary. Written public comments received in accordance with the COVID-19 Special Notice for Public Comment Guidelines are printed on the meeting agenda. If authors of the written correspondence would like to speak, they should raise their hand and the chair will call upon them at the appropriate time. All written correspondence received after that and during the meeting will be entered into the record. A roll call vote will be taken for all action items. Thank you for participating in a meeting of the Contra Costa Transportation Authority.
I like the end of that. I like the end of that video, the Contra Costa Transportation Authority. All right, welcome everybody. Fifi, you want to do roll call?
Yep. Okay, when you hear your last name, please let me know you are present. Committee Member Allen.
She's waving.
Okay, thank you.
I'm here.
Committee Member Anderson.
I am here.
Thank you. Committee Member Anderson.
I'm here.
Thank you. Committee Member Bremner. Committee Member Geringer. Here. Committee Member Howell.
Here.
Committee Member Hudson.
Hudson is here.
Hudson. Committee Member Hirsch. Committee Member Kamara.
Here.
Committee Member Krieg.
Here.
Committee Member Ramasier.
Here. I didn't know R came after K so quickly on this group. I was prepared, but I'm here.
Committee Member Sullivan. Committee Member Toth. Okay, please note that committee member.
I see her.
I got
I'm
her.
sorry, I heard tariff.
I got you, Debbie.
Clean
Don't
my
worry.
ears. I'm sorry. Yes.
Please note Committee Member Bremner, Committee Member Hirsch, and Committee Member Sullivan are absent.
So, and just a clarification, Rashida Kamara is not on the PAC, but Rick Ramasier is here representing County Connection.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but for these purposes, she's my boss.
Right. There's an understanding.
So I believe we have a quorum based on
Yes.
that. So let's move on to public comment. Members of the public are invited to address the committee regarding any item that is not listed on the agenda. Terry Ann or Fifi, did receive any public comments?
We did not receive any public comment cards.
Does anybody who is a member of the public have any comments they want to make now? I'm not seeing anybody wave. I'm not seeing any raised hands. Okay, so let's move on to item 4A, approval of summary of actions. Do we have a motion and a second?
So moved.
I'm sorry, who moved?
I'll second. I'll second. Hudson, second by Anderson.
Go ahead and call the roll, Fifi.
Okay, Committee Member Anderson,
Aye.
Committee Member Anderson,
Aye.
Committee Member Geringer,
Aye.
Committee Member Howell,
Aye.
Committee Member Hudson,
Yes.
Committee Member Krieg,
Yes.
Committee Member Ramasier, aka Kamara,
Yes.
Committee Member Toth.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously by all members present.
Excuse me, I believe you missed Alan, but
I'm sorry, who?
Deborah Allen.
Did I? Oh, I'm so sorry. Committee Member Allen.
Yes.
Thank you.
I wondered why I went first.
It's not every day I get to be.
Now it's
first time as a
unanimously passed.
supervisor.
Let me tell you why, Candace.
Okay, let's move on to item 5A, update on the ATS plan to date. And I'll turn it over to Richard with Nelson Nygaard to give a presentation or start the presentations today.
Great, thanks very much, Peter. If someone, I believe Marvin, if you could pull the slideshow up, I'd appreciate it. I believe we're into slide number 3.
Yeah, 1 second, Richard.
Sure. Let me just say while Marvin's pulling that up, if I have any connectivity issues, Naomi's going to take over. I will have my phone as a backup, but I've had a few internet issues, but I'm hoping that this is going to be fine. And again, while Marvin's pulling that up, we've got quite a lot to cover over here. The focus of this meeting is going to be on the mobility strategies, and hopefully most of you got to read the documents that were sent out. As you'll see, there were 20 strategies there. So we've thought long and hard about how we're going to get your input on this and do it all in the time that we have available to us. Naomi and I are going to tag team on this, and I'll keep on talking until the slides come up. So some of the things that we have done since the last meeting is we spent quite a bit of time on the overall coordination structure that we discussed last time, and that's going to be refined for the purposes of the draft report. There shouldn't be any big surprises, but we were looking to have it reflect what came up in the meeting. There we go. We've also developed and refined the strategies that we're going to be discussing today and our whole approach to the evaluation. And we've discussed further public engagement options. Naomi's going to talk about these later on. And then while all of this was going on, we of course had to refine the chapters because we're in the process of writing the draft report at the same time. Next slide, please. So before I get into the potential strategies, what I want to do is just make sure that in case some of you did not have a chance to review our approach to the evaluation criteria, I'm going to briefly go over what is involved there. And let me just say that the purpose of this meeting is really to get your direction and to help us prioritize some of these strategies. You know, you are an advisory committee, but you're a very important source of input for us. So that's why we're meeting today, and we have one meeting that we'll talk about later in January. But again, in the interest of time, we'll briefly touch on each of them, but we would like you to let us know if you have a strong opposition to any of the strategies that are being discussed. And we will assume that silence is assent. So if we don't hear otherwise from you, we'll assume that you're in agreement with the discussion as is. However, again, because of the time available to us, we're assuming that quite a few of the comments that we get will need to be submitted after this meeting, simply because of the volume of strategies. And again, we'll tell you the timeline, but you have until the end of next week to do that. Couple of other comments? Yeah, so it's okay to skip, when you're doing the score sheet, it's fine with us if you just choose certain strategies that you want to score because you don't feel like you have expertise in the others. And we've arranged the scoring criteria. Actually, I'm going to just go back so I can see everybody. I'd like to get a sense of how many people did have a chance to read the document and read the evaluation criteria. Okay, let me just pull the full gallery up. Okay, I'm not seeing the whole gallery, but looks like there. Could somebody just give me a reflection on what proportion have looked at the document?
Maybe you could hit the thumbs up on your reactions.
Yeah, not everybody has their video on. So of the people who have their video on, probably 80% of people have had their hands up.
Great, thank you.
But only maybe half the people have their video on. So
okay, that is helpful. So I will definitely go over the evaluation criteria before we actually get into the strategies. And what we're hoping is that some of you have already inserted scores in your score sheet that was sent out to you by Naomi, but that this is your opportunity to make changes to your scores, to think about how you may want to score them after this meeting. And based on what you hear from the discussion, you may well decide to change some of your scores. And at the end of the day, we don't want to get too hung up on, the difference between a 3 or a 5 or something like that. Really, this is intended to give us overall direction and that we have the pulse of the committee in terms of what your priorities are. We have 4 evaluation criteria, 4 groups of criteria. And Peter, in his email to you, suggested that you focus on 2 out of the 4. But let me tell you, the first 2 are the financial criteria, where we're looking at costs and the cost per beneficiary, funding availability. Those are all really critical, but we felt that to some extent that requires sort of inside knowledge about what funding sources are out there and what the costs of different strategies are. So we weren't expecting, except for those of you who are very intimately involved with some of these strategies, for you to score those based on the financial criteria. Similarly, with the implementation criteria, we have a sense from our work in other places in the country and in the Bay Area how difficult it is to implement some of these, or how easy they are. Can they be staged? That sort of thing. So we'll be relying sort of on the expertise of the team for those. But the 2 that I'd really like you to focus on are the transportation benefits criteria and the community benefits criteria. For transportation benefits, there are subcategories, and when you get to the score sheet, you'll see, and Naomi, I think, said this in the description that was sent with the score sheet, that you can choose to just skip over the subcategories and just put a score in for transportation benefits without breaking it down by the number of problems and trip types, the number of beneficiaries or unserved needs and measurable benefits. But in general, if you think a strategy will have a large number of residents who will benefit, that it addresses multiple concerns, and that has growth potential, you should give it a 4 or a 5. The flip side of that, obviously, if there's a small number of residents who benefit and only addresses one concern, you could give it a 1. Similarly with community criteria, and this is obviously a very important one that's sort of a mainstay of these types of plans. We want to know, is there going to be community support? Are there going to be elected officials who are going to be willing to champion this strategy? And we've also got a sense of that from the input we got from the surveys in terms of how much support there'd be from the community at large. So it's both community writ large, but also specific individuals who would be willing to take these strategies to the next stage. Acceptability, what we said here is, while a strategy may look good on paper, there may be some reasons, cultural, practical, financial, that would result in it not being successful. And the bottom line is, even if there's a strategy that we think is a good one, will the target population actually use it? And then acute needs. We included this category, and this has been honed over years of working on different projects, whereby people had said there may be some, smallish groups, subgroups that don't necessarily get the recognition they need, but they have acute needs. And if this particular strategy would benefit them, then that should be taken into account. And the same would be true for unserved groups. If you think there's high community support and serves a great need, then you give it 4 to 5, etc. So before we get into the specific strategies, are there any questions on the evaluation criteria and how you're going to use the score sheet?
Richard, could I jump in? This is Charlie.
Please. Yes, Charlie.
So, I again, in kind of going through this and trying to make sense out of it, it's a long shopping list. It's a lot of things that we could be spending money on. And it doesn't really have a list of goals and objectives at the end. So there was one on there, do we do community shuttles, grocery shuttles or something? And I think, well, what do we know about that? I could, have a general sense or a feeling about it, but we don't have really any ability to, excuse me, to evaluate that, to know how many people would be affected, how many people would take advantage of it, what the demand for it is, what the needs, and that's sort of across all of these categories. So we're making value judgments, I think, about a number of strategies, but as far as I can tell, there hasn't been opportunity cost assessed or any other, kind of case made for a particular strategy in service of an end goal or an objective. So I found, this exercise to be a little bit difficult to comprehend, and I had some trouble with it. And I can make guesses about many of these things, but as you say, there's many strategies, and we don't know what this is leading to, how we would prioritize things to accomplish something.
Right. Thanks. Okay, go ahead. Did somebody else want to say?
It's Deborah Allen. I second that of Mr. Anderson. I really didn't know what to do with most of this, and tried to read through the explanations, but I just don't feel like there's enough information for me to give rankings on these things.
Yeah, so let me take a stab at this, and if anyone else from the team wants to chime in, that would be great. The overall objective is the objective of the study, right, which is intended to be expanding the mobility options of people with disabilities and seniors and veterans in the county. So to the extent that these strategies you think meet that goal, I'm not sure, Charlie, short of doing a study in which we actually do an evaluation of every single strategy, and to which the answer would be, it depends on probably every score, depends on how large a shopping shuttle, depends, is it serving the city of Concord? That is not what the study is about. That's not the scope of this. What this is really intended to do is, once we hear from you which of these strategies you think are more likely to get community support and get people out there to champion them and for people to use them, and also how beneficial they are. Now, some of you are in much better position than others because you're actually transportation professionals, and some of you aren't. So that's why I said at the beginning, feel free to skip the ones that you don't feel expertise in. But absolutely, any one of these, I would have a dozen, it depends, on the scope. But there's no way that we could come up with a mechanism for evaluating these in which we're giving all the different options of what scale we're talking about. And so what I'm hearing from you is you're finding it difficult, actually from both of you, to make a determination because there are too many questions surrounding that as to how much of an investment is it going to be? So how do I prioritize this if I don't know what it's going to be up against, for example, what other strategy it's up against? If you have a suggestion for helping us prioritize those that doesn't involve like a individual study of each strategy, we're totally open to input. But tell me if that is the concern that you have, Charlie, that you were raising.
Well, I'm wondering what the end product of this exercise is going to be. And if we're, filtering out options that are completely, unproductive or, kind of unpalatable, and are left with a series of viable options that we move forward to some other further, next step. But I think that, based on the number of questions that there are about any of these strategies, and cost being a huge factor in it, I think that coming out with a prioritized list in that kind of vacuum is a little bit dangerous. So I don't think that, from my perspective, this is a time. I mean, this is really what, agencies who have responsibilities do all the time. They look at strategies, they look at problems, and they figure out which ones they can afford to solve and which they can't. And, what do you use as an effective way of solving the particular problem that's most pressing? And, I think for us as a group, and with a variety of different experiences, to come up with a list that is somehow put into a plan is probably it's something that gives me a lot of misgivings.
Okay, would anybody else like to weigh in on that? Peter?
I do. I'm waving a hand.
Yeah,
If I can, Richard. I looked at the survey. I think I see what both Deborah and Charles are saying, but I looked at it differently. After reading it, I said, this is an opportunity to get down on paper some of the thoughts you have up to this point. Then we take what you have down on paper. We see if it's coalescing to everybody. I mean, imagine if everybody did this and we're all saying, we don't get it, we don't know what to do, and everybody came up with a 5 in the same spot. I think that's kind of like a direction that says, well, let's explore this more and see where we can go with it. You've got 20 items there, and I went through, and I think the top, to me, a priority is you have 3, maybe 5. And oddly enough, 1, 2, 3, I thought you prioritized them yourself when I was reading the staff report. And 20 would have been number 4. Opportunities, because grants come at different times. And right now, if I looked at this thing and everybody agreed with me, which I really doubt is ever going to happen, I'd be saying, Peter, let's go after something at the Air District while the money's available. And there's the determinant factor also. What is available to do any of this stuff? To me, a lot of it's looking at how do TNCs going to fit in this anyway. They seem to change year to year how we can make them work. So to me, it's just another step in the direction, and we're moving towards what Charles is asking. It's just how are we going to get there? And maybe it's a little slower for some of us, but I'm slow. I like what you're doing. I'd like to see what other people think and then what our next step is.
So Debbie has her hands up, her hand, sorry, not both hands.
Now I have my hands up. So a couple of things. So I, like Deborah, had some difficulty in sort of navigating what you wanted us to use for financial considerations when we were assigning costs to things for the very reasons you outlined. I don't have a problem with an exercise of priorities. I have a problem with level setting before we have addressed what the need is. And I fully understand as somebody who runs a business, and yes, I know people tend to think of a nonprofit as being a 501c3. That's just our tax status. I still have to run a business and pay staff and deliver services and do everything that a business does. So I get that we can't do things in the absence of having money to do them, but I don't allow that to define what the need is. I first look at what need is, and then I look at how I can meet that need. And I look at how I get external resources to meet that need if I don't have them. And we are doing the process wrong in that regard, if that's the way we're thinking about it. This is all we have the funding for, so this is all we can do. That's what we've done for the last 3 decades, and now we're here. So I just think let's go through this process, but let's have in mind, so let's say that you, Richard, we get to the point where the task force is being stood up. The task force can actually look at entire systems. What we're doing here is taking a piecemeal approach. What if we heard from 3 different CTSAs or 3 different administrators of programs where they have a single point of entry and a coordinated system of transit and single bus rides and all that fun stuff? What if we heard from 3 different experts in 3 different areas who have implemented it differently where it works in each of those areas? That might help us look at a full picture, because I think piecemeal, and we can do this exercise, I'm fine with that. I'd like to see what priorities are, but I feel like in the absence of looking at what the whole system looks like, we're just continuing down the same path we've been on. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie.
So I know we need to get going on this because we have a lot of things to go through. I think both Charlie and Deborah are right in that it was a difficult, and we anticipated it would be a difficult ask to just throw you this matrix and this big long list and say score them, and we kind of knew there was, and like Richard mentioned early, there's financial issues and implementation issues that the transit folks or the transportation folks are experts at, and then there's the community and the community benefit that a lot of you are also experts at. And kind of the idea here isn't necessarily to rank these, but just to get your input so that it can be part of the bigger picture as this potential, even if it's a list or concept of strategies, moves forward to the final report document, which some of these could become recommendations, some of them might not be, some of them might be this is something the task force is going to have to look at harder and further, and some of these aren't implementable at all, and some of them are, and we have to look at this. Some of them are going to be really inexpensive, but they're also no benefit. So why do them? Why spend any money on them? And some of them, they're going to have a huge amount of benefit that they're also going to be very expensive. And that's like, okay, this is important to the community. We need to find the money to do this. But we won't know that until we get your input on this list of items and things start to coalesce as kind of a bigger vision of what we're looking for. So I just ask everybody to be patient. Let's try and get through these and see what we get at the end.
Thanks, Peter. And I should just add that these strategies reflect a response to the needs that we had identified as over the last many months, as with all our surveys and various forms of input, the stakeholder interviews. There was a set of needs that have been identified, and these are strategies that are intended to respond to those. And there's strategies that have been used elsewhere, in some cases by CTSAs, but just as a reminder, there are very few CTSAs who are in any way comparable to what we're thinking of over here. So, it's not like we can draw on and we've spoken to others, but I think it, by its very nature, it does need to be somewhat piecemeal, even if that's not the way we would love to do it in a perfect world. But we've had to draw on different best practices, both from CTSAs, but also from other programs around the country. Debbie, you had your hand up, it went down, if I see correctly. No? Okay. Peter, could I just rely on you to tell me if there's, because I can see the participants list, so if somebody puts their hand up digitally, I can see it, but if somebody puts their hand up, please let me know.
Can I just clarify for you, Richard? We don't have the option of raising our hand or not raising our hand or chatting. That's not an option in the way that this webinar is set up. However, we can react to things. So what Peter was saying, I was just doing a thumbs up saying, yes, Peter, I'm with you. That was great.
Got it.
And we can put in if Peter's talking.
Right. Great. So Naomi and I will not be interrupted. Okay, well, why don't we go into the first set of strategies? And again, there are 20, but they're grouped, and we're not going to dwell on each one. I'm just going to remind you what's in them. And if you have either clarification questions, or if you have strong opposition to something because you just don't think it makes sense, that's what we'd like to hear. And we did allocate, I believe, close on 70 minutes for this part of it. So this is the bulk of the meeting, just to be clear. Okay, let's start with the specific strategies. The first grouping is increasing local and regional mobility. And the first strategy is expanding the current one-seat ride pilot program. And we know what the goals of that are: to improve connectivity between paratransit programs and eliminate transfer trips. The vulnerability of the program is that it is a pilot at the moment, and it does require a very high level of collaboration and cooperation, which so far has been the case. I haven't heard an update from Rashida in the last few weeks, but we're assuming that it's slowly growing unless we hear otherwise. But that's what that first strategy is. The next one is same-day trip programs. This is a universal need. Everywhere we do projects, this is what people say they don't have enough of. And so we've included in there same-day trip programs. Could be something like Go San Ramon, could be the use of taxis or TNCs to meet those needs. Volunteer driver programs, we know there is an extensive one already in the county that Elaine operates. This speaks to expansion of that, not necessarily of that program, but that could be obviously one way to go, since there is one already in place, or it could be establishing other volunteer driver programs in the county. The next one is service beyond ADA service areas and regular service times. This is a big one that we heard a lot of, and we have some ideas. Now, let me just say, for each one of these, there's a much more detailed description in the document that was sent to you. And in that one, we gave as examples having premium paratransit fares, first and last mile shuttles, microtransit zonal dial rides that connect to BART. So that's quite an extensive strategy. And then subsidized on-demand programs. Those could be with TNCs or taxis, could be through the use of script or vouchers, etc. So those are the strategies in that group. Why don't you take a moment to think about each of those? If you want to, hopefully some or many of you have that score sheet in front of you. Why don't we take a minute, pause here. You can either use the time to put in your scores, or if you have a question, clarification, or an objection, let us know.
I've already turned mine in, so I'll tell you, it's exactly like I told you 5 minutes ago. I looked at the first three things on your list, the first three bullets, and to me, they're probably the highest priority as I go through here. I mean, you can't have a subsidized on-demand program if you don't have a program. I mean, you can't worry about funding something if there's no program. And those first three that you identified, to me, if I'm reading all the words and everything here, seem to be the priorities that we are having some success with. That doesn't mean we don't do the others. It's just that in my mind, you can't have 20 priorities. It has to be 1, 2, 3, maybe 4, 5 tops, or they're not priorities.
So Dave, did you give 5s to those first 3 in your score sheet?
Probably.
Or something close to it. Okay.
I'm pretty sure I did give 5s to all of them.
Okay. Anybody else like to comment?
Yeah, I would be happy to, and I agree wholeheartedly with the mayor of San Ramon, with Dave. So no, it's one of those things where all three of these I've seen working really, really well, and they all serve a different demographic. They all serve a different population and really important needs that would otherwise be met in a institutional, inefficient way that is something I do not want us going back to. I mean, yes, we'll keep having our inefficient institutional stuff because we inevitably need to, but I really agree with Dave that these are programs, as he and I both sit on County Connection, of course, but we see these as supplementing what we do. And then in lieu, of course, looking at what we've been able to do with the one-seat pilot program, you know, with Debbie and Rashida. It's just been phenomenal. And today I was taking my 90-year-old father to the doctor, you know, to get an ILEA shot. And I just thought, you know, if he was having to navigate transportation and didn't have his daughter taking him, what obstacles would he be encountering? And not everyone has a daughter who can take them to get their appointment. So I'm very, I think I agree with Dave too. I don't want to just prioritize everything in the world, because everything is important, but the three top ones are ones that we're doing well. We're seeing them work really, really well. And they're models, templates that can be implemented. For example, even the volunteer driver program, you know, the La Marinda folks have figured this one out so well. And maybe there's another community where a similar program would work really well. Some places it wouldn't, but nevertheless, I'm very supportive of those being the top three.
Thank you. I'm seeing a
Richard, we
blue
have
hand.
one more hand.
Yeah.
J. Domingue
Cool.
Ford. Could you please identify yourself?
Yeah, hi, this is Jessica Dominguez. I work for Overcoming Transportation Barriers for Contra Costa County Behavioral Health. I had a question. Has anybody thought has anybody thought about because I know for me, if my grandparents didn't have me and my mom around to drive them around when they were alive, that they wouldn't have gotten to any of their appointments just because they my grandfather spoke broken English and my grandmother was really timid and didn't she was just very timid. So I was wondering, do you guys have volunteers, or is there something being put into play as far as like different languages? Because I know that is a big deal. Like because I know if my grandmother would have had to use paratransit, she probably never would have gotten to her appointments just because it's an unfamiliar face, the language barrier and stuff like that.
Yeah. We certainly, when looking at accessibility, take language into account. And, it's not explicitly called out because it's assumed basically in these different strategies that there would be at least bilingual capacity. But from your comment, I think that it actually is important that we name that in the report, that we do have a section on informing people of the options that are available to them. So through a call center, and those, I know the one in Alameda County, they have many languages that people can get information on their transportation options. So we just assume that that's the case, but out. And let me just say, based on the fact that was it Jessica did have a blue hand up, letting us know that she has a comment. I believe we can see your hands raised, so that is an option for you as well electronically.
I just figured out how to do it. You just have to click on participants. My apologies.
Yeah. Anybody else want to comment? You're thinking about what scores to put in for these strategies? Again, the focus being on the transportation benefits and on the community criteria. Fifi, are there any other hands? I'm not seeing any.
I don't see any hands.
Okay. Okay, if that's the case, let's go on to the next one, and Naomi will take this one.
Okay, so we're broadly referring to this category as improving coordination among providers and community stakeholders. And I just want to note that we try to utilize these categories to help us organize these strategies because we did have so many. And then the strategies, if you read the full description, have a lot within themselves. We just had a lot we wanted to share that we thought was of value. But you can feel free to note on your sheet if you feel like something should be categorized differently. There's arguments to make for many different strategies of putting them in different places or labeling them differently. We are happy for your input or clarification on those. So the strategies we have listed here are what came up earlier, shopping trips with package assistance, which as we've seen it before has been done on kind of a community, city or senior center level, it could be done on a nonprofit level. It's been sort of on a smaller community level as opposed to a very wide project, but that doesn't mean that couldn't be implemented a number of different places. A hospital discharge service, which really has two parts. There's an information and education piece where people are connected to services before they're discharged from the hospital, transportation services that they might not have needed before. And then ideally also with what is essentially an on-demand trip when they are discharged, since it's not always possible to predict that timing on that. Customized guaranteed ride home programs for people with disabilities or the other populations we mentioned as well. These, if you've heard of guaranteed ride home programs, they're often tied to commuters. And it's sort of an idea or a safety net so that people can do what they need to and have less fear of being stranded. So it's really a similar sort of theory in that regard. And means-based, which means for people who are low income or need help with the funding for something, car share, including accessible option. So I'm happy to try to provide more examples or clarification on any of these, if anybody has any questions.
I have no questions, but I have a comment. If I've already given you my 3 priorities. If you want to add a 4th one, shopping trips with package assistance, since my business park's already doing it. If you guys want to refund them on what they're paying, I'll probably be a hero, but I can tell you it works. Watched it for a while. I think it's where a lot of these business parks are heading, where they'll help, because I don't know how you're going to keep housing out of them as these RENA numbers come up higher and higher and higher, but they're all good programs. It's the same thing. You've got to focus on what is priority, and I couldn't put it ahead of the first 3. My thoughts.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the last part? You couldn't what?
I couldn't put these ahead of my first 3 priorities.
Oh, got it.
Debbie,
Thank
I'm
you.
along the lines that sooner or later, if you have 20, you got to get down to 3, 4, or 5 as what you feel are the priorities. That doesn't mean they aren't. Every one of them, believe me, it wouldn't be the first time I've lost a vote, but it's trying to get your ideas on the table so other people can prioritize theirs also.
I hear that and I agree. I would just say, you know, I want to just focus us back on the fact that we have 3 additional decades of life expectancy that we collected last century that we've done zero planning for. And so when we talk about prioritization, it's going to be different for different age and ability groups. And so it's really, this exercise just has some added complexity that can't be addressed because of that. So recognizing that whatever it is that we build in a system of accessible transit must be a continuum of services. And I would agree with you. We just went through this process with the master plan for aging. We had over 800 recommendations. And once we came up with all the recommendations, we went back and we said, these are the top 3 areas that we have to prioritize. These are the things that are policy. These are the things that don't cost much. And these are the things that need long-term solutions. So I get all of that.
Thank you. Are there other comments? And there is space on the worksheet to tell us about your short and long-term thoughts, definitely.
Naomi, I'm not seeing any more hands or gestures or people hopping up and down or anything, so.
Hey, Peter, this is Rick. I can't seem to find where I raised my hand. I think I got the same challenges as Debbie.
Yeah, I can't either.
Anyway, I just wanted to ask a quick question to confirm my understanding. Richard, these items came out of your work with, you know, when you went out into the community and asked for input as to what's important to them. Is that right?
Right. I mean,
So these
they reflect a whole array of inputs.
These are generated by actual, not that we in the bureaucrats aren't actual people, but people who actually are out there looking for services.
Right.
Right. Okay.
Right.
I just want to make sure I understand that, because I think the third and fourth bullet on this slide are really interesting, and I'll tell you why. There's this emerging, as we all know, interest in this region, in this country, in income inequality and equity. And Therese McMillan, the executive director of MTC, that's one of her focuses with the Blue Ribbon Task Force, which is going to have a profound impact on public transit in this region. And income inequality, we now know, if you read enough stuff, is being one of the things that's causing it is, every time we have a technological advancement in our society, it tends to unintentionally exacerbate income inequality. And the Guaranteed Ride Home program is an interesting thing. I've never thought of this, but I see this bullet and I'm thinking, this is something the ADA did not anticipate when it was enacted in 1990, because nobody was doing Guaranteed Ride Home programs in 1990. And now they're part and parcel of a lot of mobility plans that are emerging across the country on first and last mile solutions and all kinds of things. And I just think that this is interesting that this is emerging now. And it's a sign to me that the consumer, the customer, the resident is slightly ahead of the planners on an emerging issue. Same with item 4. As car sharing options become more prevalent, especially as we move towards autonomy and what opportunities are there, we have to make sure that we don't leave people behind. And I think this is great that we're flagging this now. I'm not suggesting that these two rise to the top of any list, Richard, particularly with this study, but I think these are interesting observations made by people that you've been talking to. I just wanted to say that, because
great.
I could see this being glossed over.
Can I add on to that, Richard? Because I actually was thinking the same way, Rick, but what my focus on when I used that word priority was improved coordination. And I looked at this and I'm wondering, is this the kind of thing that you go back to the author of the commuter benefit and see if there's ways of throwing it in? For example, with Bishop Ranch, when they're paying for things like this, or they're setting up their own assisted programs, where the employer actually can get some benefit out of that, then you're dealing with the financial end of it also. So and especially in this area, because the author is Steve Glazer. And I mean, it was his baby. So take a lot of this if we do rise it in priority, and just keep in mind that maybe there's some financing out there anyway with employers.
Thanks, Dave. I just wanted to respond to a couple of things. Firstly, Rick, thanks for acknowledging that. And I think since you mentioned it, for example, and I'm saying this because we do have a bit of time, the means-based car share, part of the reason for us putting that in there is because there are actually examples of car share programs in urbanized areas that are targeted towards low-income people who are not banked, because usually you need a credit card or that sort of thing. So there have been innovative things that have been done to try and address that need. And that's why we included it over here, just to convey to you that we are trying to take a nuanced look at some of these needs, and also look at some real life options that have already been implemented. The part that we've added that may be a tweak to this is the accessibility option. In the same vein, I have to respond to Debbie, your comment about we've added 3 decades to people and there's been zero planning. Somebody's been doing this for more than 30 years, and I dare say there are other people on this call who are in a similar situation, who have been very involved in planning for people with disabilities and seniors in all these decades. I just wanted you to recognize the fact that when we look at some of these strategies, clearly we are taking into account the different needs of somebody who's over 80 and needs a concierge program because they don't have a cell phone to use a TNC, versus somebody who's in their 60s who may have a phone. So I just didn't want to leave that comment hanging out there, that we're using some kind of blunt instrument with these strategies. Each one of these is very nuanced and takes into account the specific needs of the complexity of each of these populations. Just wanted to say that. And are there any more before we switch to the next, before we move on to the next slide?
Question.
Yes, Mary.
How, if you do a car share, how do you get to the car?
Well, so I can speak to the low income aspect of this, because keep in mind, this would really have very limited applicability in Contra Costa County. It would really probably need to be in the highly urbanized areas in which people have relatively easy access to the programs locations, to their pods where they are. But Naomi, if you can speak to the accessibility option, if you had any ideas on that when that was added in.
Well, in other places locally, we see them often at BART stations or transit sort of centers like that. And I see sort of the concern about, okay, well, what if you can't get there? But then this means that this probably isn't going to work for you. You're going to need a first mile, last mile solution instead. The idea of accessing a car share is for trips that need a car, like you know, you need to get a lot of groceries, or just something, you know, or you just really can't predict your timing, or you need something late at night or on the weekend more, that you're going to need more of an option of an individual car. The accessible option is a challenging part. MTC used to sponsor an accessible vehicle or two through city car share before that went sort of out of business, and well, it merged into Get Around. And I think that the example we have of that is not operating the way we want it to right now, or we as in sort of a broader community sense would like to see options out there because of insurance issues. So it's definitely a challenge, and that's why it's a suggestion of a strategy, because we think for people who need it, it could be a very powerful thing. There are news articles about when city car share, when that option went away, and what that meant to people losing access to that accessible vehicle. So we think it's worth exploring more if feasible within the scope of the project.
Thanks. Can we go on to the next slide, please? Okay, I'll take these and Naomi will take the last lot. So yeah, so this is increasing awareness of existing services. One of the things we heard from the surveys and from the stakeholder interviews was that people aren't aware of a lot of the services that are out there, or it's difficult for them to access the information. So these were some strategies that were intended to address this particular need. And as probably many of you are aware, there's been one call, one click programs that have been set up in different counties all over the country, actually. Some of them are just information and referral programs, but others go beyond just INR. There are travel navigator services where really the person who's answering the call serves almost like a travel agent, finds out the particular needs in terms of location and mobility of the person who's calling, and then will have access through the web to the range of options, and then really links them up with the most appropriate service, that they don't need to be calling all these different places. They may even help them with filling out an eligibility application form. So it goes way beyond just information and referral. The next one is travel training. And I believe West County has a pilot travel training program in place. But this is being done clearly not during COVID times. Most of these are on hiatus. But having extensive travel training programs, to the extent that anybody can be shifted from paratransit onto fixed route, even if it costs over $1,000 to train an individual, which it often does, to use fixed route, certainly from a cost benefit analysis and from a mainstreaming analysis, it's a very effective option. And there are quite a few travel training programs in the Bay Area. Real-time information. So many paratransit programs already give people who have access to an iPhone or whatever the possibility of knowing where their paratransit vehicle is located. They can also be informed if barred elevators are, well, actually, the fixed route ones, I believe, is more what we're adding to this particular strategy, so that things like, are there wheelchair spaces on buses, for example, and knowing which BART elevators are not operable, and having that information in real time would go a long way to enhancing the effectiveness or the convenience to the riders. And then the final one is programs for veterans who either have a disability or are seniors. As we found in one of our stakeholder interviews and is documented in the report, the draft report that will be coming out later, the VA does have extensive programs for veterans to go to medical facilities. What they don't do is serve other non-medical needs for the most part. They may allow people to use them to go pick up, go to the pharmacy and that sort of thing, but non-medical trips are not served. And for many veterans, the other programs are not viable options. So some places like San Mateo County has developed a veterans peer travel training program because they found that veterans felt more comfortable being trained by somebody else who was a veteran, just as an example. So what this strategy would do is try and fill in some of the gaps. Also, I should say, besides the fact that it's limited to medical trips, people who don't have an honorable discharge often aren't entitled to the same benefits as others. So it's filling in those gaps is what that strategy is. Do you want to take some time to think about how you'd like to score these as you go through those? If you have any questions, now would be a good time to ask. Any clarifications? I see iPhone has a hand up, but I can't
I
tell from
believe
that.
that's Elaine Welch.
Oh, okay. Elaine, would you like to say something?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to make a comment here. Everything you're saying is very valid, and our county is loaded with veterans, many of whom are now from World War II and other wars who are requiring more and more assistance. We contacted the VA when we set up our Rides for Veterans program a few years back, and the things they made clear is a couple things you said that I think are very important. They have no intention of doing shopping trips or non-medical trips of any kind. They must be medical, and at this point, the veteran must be able to utilize a van and not necessarily a wheelchair-equipped van. So consequently, the reason we started the door-through-door program for veterans is we found the ones that were really left in a big gap were those that needed door-through-door assistance, which we provide. So the VA calls us all the time with now for them what is a free service to take on the veterans. We also recruit veteran drivers who are the younger, healthier ones to help the vets because of that camaraderie issue you were talking about. So I think there's something we want to be sure that we acknowledge in here is the Veteran Administration at this time is not going to help us with what we're doing and needs to be expanded. They have, at my understanding, no intention of doing that and rely on a nonprofit to do it. So I just wanted to make that clear. That is going on in our county. It just needs to be bigger.
Great. Thank you, Elaine. And thanks for the clarification on the fact that you actually already have some services that are directed towards veterans. Yeah, thank you.
So. And I just wanted to add real quick, and we also are taking their service animals. We have special training now for our drivers handling service animals. That's it.
Thank you.
So can I say too, I've been noting that just making comments on each of the cells where I put a score. If there's something like what Elaine just covered, I do that. Like the post-discharge trips, you know, hospitals need to be, or health plans need to be held accountable. It's not always like, oh, Contra Costa Transportation Authority has to figure out how to fund this. Like there are many cases where we should be saying, hey, you know, such and such entity, hey, VA. So I'm going to call my Congress member. And I know that, you know, government bodies don't operate like that, but but nonprofits and advocates and stakeholders and service utilizers certainly do. So I just want to call that out.
Great, and thanks for the reminder, Debbie. Please do use that note section. That may be where we get some of the most interesting comments. I appreciate you pointing that out.
I could chat, Richard, I don't have a hand, but I think Elaine made some very good points, because this potential strategy is increase awareness. And if nobody knows, even on the panel that we have here, except Elaine, what she just said, that's an indicator that something needs to be done. I'm actually being nice and looking to see if Deborah Allen's still around before I hit her with the real-time information about BART elevators. Is this the ones that work inside the kiosk or outside?
Who is that question directed to, Dave?
Well, I don't understand the question.
The elevators that you can pick up before you go through the paying for BART, that take you right up to the platform for free?
Well, okay, Dave, you know, as you know, I think he's just setting me up here, but so I can make a big announcement. At our downtown Concord station, there is a brand new ADA accessible fare gate and railing around the elevators now. And I think that's actually a very exciting step forward for the ADA community, because what we have noticed is a substantial decrease in the use of those elevators, which will mean that they operate better more often, they won't wear out as much, they don't require as much maintenance, because the people who really need them, the people with disabilities, are going to have them available to them as they move through that new ADA fare gate, and the other people who were using it and shouldn't have been, not so much. So that is at Concord and Coliseum, and we are working through the whole system over the next year to address all of those elevators that are outside the paid fare gates, and so you won't even have that situation in a year from now.
Great, thank you.
I did a very large project for BART on BART elevators and mitigation strategies for when they are broken. And I had a huge spreadsheet. So anybody who wants to talk about BART elevators offline is welcome to reach out to me. I can talk about it forever.
Yeah, but Naomi, if the elevator takes you from outside the kiosk so that you're not hitting the clipper card directly up to the platform, it is broken, whether it works or not. Somebody's paying for it.
Oh yeah. Well, I always tag my card. I go through the swing gate. But
thank you.
Hey, Richard, this is Peter. You brought up a nuance that I was thinking in a different direction on the third bullet, real-time information. I was thinking maybe that meant for a paratransit vehicle to do like you said, a person can see on maybe their smartphone where the vehicle is, but they also have systems now where, you know, there's a call when the vehicle's 10 minutes away or 10 minutes out, that the person receives a call so they know to, you know, be prepared and be ready to go, and how that might help, you know, the paratransit system keep better time and less no-shows and things like that. So is that a strategy? Is that something that's not considered as part of this strategy and would be someplace else, or?
It certainly can. I don't know the extent to which those are in place in the Contra Costa paratransit programs, but that's pretty common throughout the country. Some places say they're not able to do it. One of which is my client, so I'm not going to say which agency it is. They say they only get 70% accuracy, so it's not worth including it because people are going to get the wrong information. And others say it's just totally straightforward. They've been doing it for decades. So I actually, those of you who are Rashida, Charlie, I don't know if Debbie's on as well. I don't know if you have call ahead information on your paratransit programs. If not, we will include those.
We do at Tri Delta Transit.
Yeah.
No, not yet. We're working on it though.
Can we keep that in the strategy then?
Yeah. We have it for mass information. We've been doing that ever since COVID, but we need to, and that was kind of like a value added. We weren't even expecting it with our contractor, but now we want to customize it so that it's specific to the passenger. So we're working on that.
Thanks. So to answer your question, Peter, yeah, we would certainly include that as part of the real-time information.
And I guess another thing I would just put out to the whole group as you're looking at your matrix and thinking about scores for these is the understanding that these, for the most part, are all existing programs. And so you might score them differently, knowing it's more of a kind of a marketing thing. We just need to get the word out better that these are available to folks. Now, maybe they're available, but they need to be beefed up or expanded somehow. So I would just say as to give the planning team a better opportunity to, you know, prioritize these or see where they fall on a list, or, you know, just consider comments, make appropriate comments in your score sheets as you think about that.
Great. I see Elaine has her hand up. She did have a hand up, maybe not.
And Richard, this is
yes.
Charlie. If
Yeah.
I could just jump in here for a second. One of the complications for us is East Bay Paratransit. And East Bay Paratransit is the kind of service that provides the actual access to the BART stations, and they're a different entity. So and it overlaps the county. It's a primarily Alameda County focused service, but probably one to bring into the conversation.
Absolutely, and it's a good point, because I've heard from East Bay Paratransit that they're looking to see. They didn't join in with the one-seat ride, but it's not like they're objecting to it. They want to see what happens in Contra Costa County and see how that experience goes before they consider joining in. So that's an example. And of course, they are a huge operator that's also in the county. So, Elaine, I think you do have your hand up.
Yes. Can you hear
Please.
me?
Yes, we can.
I just wanted to again add one more thing on here, and I had to leave the call for a while. I don't know if this was addressed on the one call, one click INR.
Yeah.
We publish, and we're waiting to do it right now post-COVID because so many of us are dropping like flies. But anyhow, the way to go Contra Costa, I want to be sure that as we look at this, that this doesn't become just a sole thing that one nonprofit has to go out and beg money to get to put together every year or every 2 years as a travel guide for all cities, all types of transportation throughout the county. But we need to continue it. The other thing is we're not one call, one click, but we are one call, in that we use a case management model that I put together as a geriatric rehab nurse without any real clinical side to it, where we, and by asking 5 questions of each caller, where they fit on the in the transportation models that we have. Do they fit, or where do they fit? And we also facilitate them getting to that transportation provider by phone or by referral, and helping them fill out forms. What we do not do that we really need to have in this county is what you talked about with the where they could have someone navigate for them an actual trip starting from point A to point B. And right now we have them call the bus company to do that, or paratransit to do that. And maybe that would be is something that could certainly be improved. But I want to be sure we're at least doing half of this, and we call it matching riders with providers.
Great, thank you. I think we can go on to the next slide. I'm not seeing any other hands up. So Marvin, if you could go, and I think Naomi's going to take that away.
Okay, so this topic is a little more on the technical side. This is develop partnerships for supportive transportation infrastructure. So these are things we heard, but we were less likely to hear them from a rider and more likely to hear them from a stakeholder interview, for instance. And several of them are things that have come up in previous discussions. Excuse me, sorry. So the first one is uniform countywide ADA paratransit eligibility certification. And the second is fare integration, which is of course a regional topic we hear about right now. Joint paratransit scheduling software procurement, which is also being discussed somewhat on a regional level. safe routes for seniors, safe routes for all. When we talk about that in terms of infrastructure, I mean, there is an educational component to any program like that and a programmatic level as well. But it also requires, setting up safe routes requires addressing the sidewalks, curb ramps, crossings, those sorts of things to allow people to traverse their neighborhoods, to get to transit, to get to recreation, things like that. Means-based fare subsidy, again, we're hearing this on a regional level. A lot of these, we believe they are priorities for some people because they are being talked about on a bigger scale, but we wanted to give you the opportunity to chime in on them within this project and this study. Wheelchair breakdown service encompasses, again, two parts, possibly a repair function as well as or a trip function for people, again, who are stranded. And accessible bike share. We've seen some pilots in Oakland and in San Francisco on these. They seem to be more recreational trip focused at this time, but still very important to many people and requiring partnerships, definitely. So I'm happy to provide more examples or clarifications on any of these.
I'd like to chime in if I can, Richard. Not that I'm disagreeing with you. No, I am disagreeing with you, Naomi. The initial pilot program that we set up, Bay Area Air Quality Management District, was 400 bikes, and it went down the peninsula. We eventually went out to 1,000 bikes, of which 89% were San Francisco, and they were being used and are today being used in the Mission District in particular by business. You see people in suits riding the, well, I don't go over there now, but I think they're up to about 7,000 bikes. Why I, in particular, gave this a very high ranking is because when Scott Haggerty was chair of the Air District Mobile Source and MTC took this back, there was a very specific point of the setting aside, I want to say $3.5 million for the more suburban areas like the Iron Horse Trail. It goes back several years. Candace could probably help me with the timing, but Mike Szymanski and I were on East Bay Regional Park District when we started talking about using the Iron Horse Trail and bike sharing from Pleasant Hill to Walnut Creek. And it was not much of a stretch to take it all the way up to Bishop Ranch, which now uses it all the way into Dublin, and they have their own bike share program. This is all done with bicycles as we know them. The CCTA Measure J analysis said we could look at a 243% increase in biking. And I'm telling you, the minute they come out with a reasonable electric bike sharing docking system, this thing will grow a lot more than 243%. I swear to you, San Ramon has increased 243% since March.
Well, this strategy is specifically accessible bike share.
Yes.
So those are the specific bicycles that are sit bikes or hand bikes. And so, as I said,
that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, there have been pilots in San Francisco and Oakland. And so the reason I said they've been recreational, what we've seen so far, is because people need a place to leave their mobility device and then come back to it.
Well, you're talking about docking, right?
Well,
like
no, I'm talking about like somebody has their wheelchair
yes.
and they go and they transfer themselves, or maybe they need help onto a sit bike, and then they roll around Lake Merritt or on the Embarcadero, and then they need to come back to their wheelchair. So
I'm talking bike share. The
yeah,
bike,
so this is accessible.
Or the red. I mean, there's over a dozen of them I saw 2 years ago, and I mean, we were up to 7,000 bikes on the peninsula all the way over to Berkeley. It's not small. It's a big time program that could expand very easy when you have business park buy-in.
So yeah, thank you. And I think there's a lot of capacity And it doesn't just need to be wheelchair accessible bikes. There could be more focus on biking programs for seniors, maybe with the tricycle type bikes if they need them. So I think there's a lot of possibility, but I think in this strategy we're talking about really focusing on the equity aspect for the bike share is what we're going for here.
I could add a nuance to that, Naomi. This is Peter. Rather than accessible bike share, we could also maybe put in there rebate, maybe for a senior who is, losing their ability to drive, but still has the capability of, riding a bike. Maybe, like you said, it's a, adult tricycle bike that could also be, electric assist, which is very popular right now. We, in the 501 Contra Costa program, we're actually doing a bicycle e-bike rebate program. And so maybe it's an opportunity to actually, get the bicycle into somebody's hands at a lower cost than, because some of those e-bikes, and especially the adult tricycle bikes, can get pretty expensive and are out of the price range for some people that, and it continues to help them with their health too.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's a nuance, and it's it's a certain market that it would work for, but I think it could be a fairly low cost successful thing.
I think that's an important point. In some other work we've done in the county, we have found it's harder to do bike share sometimes in suburban settings, and so subsidizing is a good way to address that, to get them into the hands of people who need them.
Rashida's hand is up.
Yeah, I had a quick question regarding the accessible bike share. Couple of things. Did the survey include the price of the bike, 2, the amount of people that potentially want it for it to make our list, 3, the cost of training individuals how to use it, the demographics of individuals in which this overall transportation need is going to, made me just a bit nervous when we talked about accessible bike share. So I know that we're going to be commenting on and scoring the level of need, but there's certainly no cost associated with this that we can refer to, the demographics of individuals that will need it, but also regarding training individuals on how to actually use this and the liability associated with providing it and training people to use it. If somebody were to get injured using one of these, how would that pan out? That seems a bit unknown for me.
Well, there are very good examples, as I said, in Oakland and San Francisco. Oakland's working with BORP, which is the Bay Area Outreach and Recreation Program, which has been running an accessible bike program out of Berkeley Marina for years. But again, when we are talking about needs, what we found is that I think that what this ties into need is more recreation and quality of life. So people may prioritize that, you as a committee and as people commenting on this project and these issues may prioritize that differently. I think we all agree that's important, but you may choose to focus on some other issues ahead of it, unless there are things, capacities to do with this type of program that you have thought of that we have not. So I think those are definitely things to bear in mind when you think about how you want to score or recommend or comment on this program.
I think we're at different programs, Naomi. I'm looking at develop partnership for supportive transportation infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm absolutely, I don't go to meetings anymore because nobody opens their doors. But when I was going into air district meetings or ABAG meetings, and I took BART, I was shocked how many bikes are inside the BART kiosk, let alone what potentially is outside. And when you open up electric bikes to East Dublin BART, and you open up all the commercial that's near there for work, to me, that's a huge market that needs to be expanded, both with the electric bike and the docking to get it right, and the hydrogen bike, which is coming fast too. And the potential for that is realized right now. And again, with COVID, I'm not exaggerating. I look out my window and there's at least a 243% increase since March. So yeah, that's, to me, that one deserves to develop a partnership. This one deserves high rankings for that reason.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
Should we go on to the next slide?
Sure.
I'm looking for hands. Don't see any.
So we wanted to make sure we made space for you if there were strategies that you would like to add. And we can do that as we speak. Richard, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I did just want to say maybe at this juncture, if anybody has looked at the score sheet and has any questions about how to use it, it seems fairly self-explanatory, but if you have any questions, now would also, since it looks like we're ahead of schedule on this meeting, this would be a time to both give us any suggestions for strategies that we haven't already mentioned, and also let us know. You can also use some of this time to fill in your scores, but let us know if it's not clear to you how to use the score sheet.
Richard, this is Joanna.
Hi, Joanna.
From WICTAC. Hi. This is your meeting and this is the PAC. Next week, the TAC's going to be meeting and probably going through a similar exercise as I predict. Is that right? Similar agenda?
Yes.
That's correct.
We hope to get that agenda out today, but it will look very familiar to you.
Okay. Well, I kind of was with Charlie and Deborah Allen about, this is kind of really not science and it's complex and all that stuff. Yet I really found going through the slides was helpful. Although I still think the clumping together of these groups, I'm kind of with Dave Hudson, just go with 1, 2, and 3, and 20. I don't know. But that leaves out travel training, which is my baby that I always think needs to be in any program. That all said, when it gets digested and we come up with scores and it goes to some sort of task force and ultimately they jigger things based on what money's out there, based on what grants are available, it could all go a different direction. So I'm not saying this isn't a futile exercise. I'm just saying that next week when we as a TAC attempt to do this, I think all 20 are valid concepts and they came from the public, from all the outreach we did, you did. I'm just trying not to weight it too heavily in any one direction because there's, subsets of this stuff and there's additional stuff. And I'm not making any point here. I'm trying to say that next week scoring will be similar challenges. People might have similar issues. And I'm thinking that's,
Joanna, yeah, that's totally understandable and, consistent with what Charlie was saying. Maybe we need to reframe this, just emphasize this one more time. The scores that come out of this are not going to be the ones, that's not going to be what the priority is in the final report. This is one of a number of sources that will be used for us to be able to prioritize the strategies in the final report. And there's going to be all sorts of caveats depending on funding, availability, and et cetera, and the costs. So, but this is actually a very important committee because it is at the policy level. So we wanted to take this in much more detail with you. Naomi's going to be handling the TAC meeting next week. So it may be a little differently handled because, again, people are bringing different kinds of expertise to each of these committees. But I didn't want to minimize the importance of this by saying these are meant to be pointers for us, but they're not determinative. So if that wasn't clear at the beginning.
That's a good caveat.
Okay.
Thanks.
Richard, it looked like we had 2 hands. Rashida, did you have your hand up?
Actually, yeah, I was going to speak to Joanna's point. Well, I thought this was part of Joanna's point. The scoring for this has been given to the PAC first before given to the TAC. The TAC that has more operational direction. They're closer to the users. They understand the needs and gaps. I feel they're just closer to it. I was wondering why we felt that we needed to bring the scoring to the PAC first versus the TAC, which would drive the movement, so to speak, and then get the PAC's blessing. At least that's how I understood that. It seems as if that it might be going just a little bit, and to Johanna's point, so now we're going backwards, I feel, to the TAC, whereas the policymakers have made determinations already based on their scorings. Did I completely misunderstand this, or?
No, I just want to jump in there, Rashida, and thanks for, making that. I wasn't trying to say the TAC needs to lead this. I think I'm really impressed. The PAC is the leadership group as I see it. And if they're not on board, there is no future for any of us. But that said, I just want to make sure we're not scoring things in stone and that we all understand directions here aren't defining the future. They're highlighting the future. I don't know how else to put it. But I have no problem with the TAC next week doing it after the PAC. The PAC is, first of all, you guys are incredibly capable and close to the issue and experts in all ways. So, but you're right, we don't, you don't necessarily open the doors and help the person in the wheelchair get seated. Yeah, that's true. Rashida, you and I are more hands-on. So I'm not having a problem with it in the order it goes. I was having more of a concern about how wedded we get.
And just to be clear, there's not one committee is blessing another committee, or that's not the way this is being set up. Just to clear, Rashida.
Richard, we have another hand from Mary Bruns.
Yes, Mary.
Two things. One, I don't see the same need around prioritizing these. I kind of see this as the general plan for how to go forward. These are the things that are important to various components of our community. That's my comment. My question is, the one seat program, does that include between counties? Is that one seat from Antioch to San Mateo or San Francisco?
I forget how we wrote this up. Clearly, the current pilot program is not about going between counties, unless I'm mistaken. But I can't remember if we wrote this one up as though it would also incorporate potentially going into adjoining counties. Can you?
It's between. It describes the four programs participating, and it's saying that we could end up incorporating, or we should focus on incorporating East Bay Paratransit. And then I think there is, I can't remember. There is a thought about going outside of the area. There's always a thought about going outside of the area. And if you include LAFTA, you are going out of the county. So I think there's
this came up some time ago. There was a big discussion between a bunch of us around how can we get our transportation systems to get people to San Francisco, for example, when they need to get there. I would like to see that be included in some way, because it was a big concern of the people that were discussing this.
And Mary, just so that you know, parallel with this process, MTC, has a blue ribbon task force that is taking a fresh look at all these issues and regionalization, and that will include things like the item that you're talking about, paratransit service between counties. So, we could recommend something, but it would likely be superseded by anything coming out of MTC at the end of the day.
That's true of a number of the infrastructure strategies. Is it worth adding to this slide trips outside of the county just to spell it out?
I thought it was in number one.
Is it there? Okay.
The way that this is Rashida. So I'm seeing it as two different things. The one C-RIDE that's happening right now is specific to participating paratransit agencies, and it's also specific to transfer trips by these paratransit agencies. And yes, they do go to different counties because of LAFTA. And if East Bay joins, then we're talking about a greater part of Alameda County. There's some trips that they take to Palo Alto, and there's some trips that they partner with San Francisco and they go into San Francisco. So spelling it out differently, this would mean that individuals who are not necessarily ADA certified or eligible, but are still seniors and persons with disabilities could have trips that go outside of the county and in different service areas. I believe that that's the difference, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's right.
Richard?
Yes, Peter.
I think I have something to add to the question mark.
Yes, please.
Potential new strategies, and I don't know quite how to capture it, but since this is the PAC, the Policy Advisory Committee, and used to kind of policy type issues, and Debbie Toth actually mentioned this before about, going to her congressman if she saw something that needed to be taken care of. Is there a strategy, or could there be a strategy around lobbying is not the right word, but legislative issues, and just advancing legislation that makes sense, or funding that makes sense. And I'll just give you an example of why this popped into my head. The CPUC collects a fee from TNCs, that a 10 cents a ride fee that's supposed to go back into providing wheelchair accessible vehicles. And lots of counties right now are being asked to become administrators within our county of that program, with all kinds of red tape and all kinds of loose ends and all kinds of a regulatory agency trying to manage a funding program that is making it very difficult for everybody. And the result is there's no wheelchair accessible vehicles being put on the street by TNCs. As a matter of fact, the ones that were happening through a contract with a service provider are no longer happening in our county. So it seems that there could be a strategy that has some ability to have a group or somebody, or give somebody the authority to really manage this advocacy for legislation or following these issues to help make the funds flow easier into the folks that are providing these services.
Peter, I'm wondering how this is different to what we had talked about for the coordination entity, having that be their responsibility. Is this different?
And maybe that's where it sits. Maybe that's just part of their role, or one of their
that's what I thought. Yeah,
and that's fine. I just didn't want it to get lost, because we talked a lot about same day services, and then there's this mechanism out there to be able to provide that through TNCs and through wheelchair accessible vehicles that's getting caught up in the bureaucracy at this point.
Yeah.
Debbie has her hand up. Debbie Toth.
Okay, go. Policy advocacy, legislative priorities, like these are things that aren't just, and I thank you, Peter, for bringing it up again. These are not just things that stakeholders, advocates, writers, and nonprofit service providers do, but our Board of Supervisors has a legislative priority platform for the state and for the federal levels each and every year. And this should be making its way to that, which should be making its way to meetings that are happening in Sacramento and DC. So this is not just like some squishy thing, it's an actual thing. And I think that we need to, even not as a part of a plan, but as a part of who we are as a county, as a transportation authority, as a whatever, need to be including in what we do. And I think the more energy and effort that can come from the transportation authority towards recognizing what different funding streams, like I feel like you have a bunch of engineers at CCTA who know a lot of engineering stuff. But how many people have expertise in disability and accessible transportation at CCTA? How much time and effort and energy is put into researching different funding streams that could, and maybe that's not the right answer. Maybe a CTSA would have all of that in it, which is my dream, obviously, as you know. Oh, where did everybody go?
I don't know.
Ah, don't put me on the screen.
Had to say, and we left.
Everybody left.
all
Debbie
here.
opened her mouth and everybody ran out of the room.
That was us all bowing down to you, Debbie.
Oh, is that what that was?
I think the
But we
view
all
got, somebody clicked on a view option, maybe one of the hosts that made the
That spotlighted Debbie.
spotlighted Debbie.
Okay,
Mine-
Debbie just
mine didn't
undid that
change.
business because Debbie's a co-host. Woo woo. All right, so I think, yes, I think we can plug that in. Thank you, Peter.
Should we go on to the next steps, which I think, Naomi, you're going to be speaking to? If we could have the next
Sure.
slide.
Sure. So one more slide.
So,
yeah.
Can I say before we do that, I want to reiterate again that please get your comments score. We keep calling them score sheets, the matrix, which is kind of a weird thing to call it too, but to Richard and Naomi, or to me, or to Fifi by the, I think it's the 18th. Is that correct?
Friday.
Friday the 18th.
Yeah.
So that we can, they can take a look at your comments and help, fill in the gaps when they're putting these.
Can we just have them go to Fifi, since she?
That's
was
probably best. Let's just have them go to Fifi. I could take back
She's
everything.
the point person.
Just have them go.
Okay.
And as has been noted, the tax regular meeting is scheduled for next Tuesday, and we're asking them to do the same thing. And we as staff are also going to go through this exercise as well. Again, as we said, not for the ideas of crunching a lot of numbers and coming up with our special scientific formula, but to just really inform our process overall. Okay, so this is a very high level, just sort of summary of our upcoming activities. We are continuing to write elements of the report now. We, in mid-December, with your help, are finishing scoring and using the information from that to refine strategies. We would like to, in the first half of January, get stakeholder input on implementation priorities, which is similar to what we are doing. What we'd like to do is put it on the website. It will be steered much more towards riders and consumers, so they won't see, for instance, things like joint software procurement. And we'll try to make them very user-friendly, but we would like to have people be able to click on some bubbles or some nice icons and have that input to us on their priorities and give them that opportunity. We'll use all of our contacts and our distribution that we've built up over the course of this project and through our outreach to guide people to that. And we will, of course, offer them as much support as possible for the people who aren't comfortable going onto the web and clicking on things. We will make sure that they can contact us or we can contact them, and we can go through the exercise verbally and still get their input. Then in January, it will be time to review the draft plan. Woo. And in February, then we need to finalize the plan so that it can move on to approvals. So Richard or Peter, do you need to add anything to that?
I don't have anything to add. Are there any questions?
Peter, this is Charlie. If I could just jump in for a second. I think it's been really useful to kind of go through the strategies and sort of discuss them. And, what occurred to me is that, ultimately nothing dropped out of the process necessarily. There are things identified as the responsibility of agencies sort of outside of this group, or Dave Hudson mentioned, if this works when the business park is bought into it, for example, for one of the items. So there are a number of, kind of actors in this. And it seems to me that kind of what this is best used for in the end is, forwarding as tools to the coordination entity, because they'll have to make decisions about, is this in a fundable area of responsibility for public agencies, or, is this something that we should, provide advocacy information out in some form, that will encourage other people to buy into it? Or is this something that we could seek legislation for and push the responsibility to, somebody who can actually deliver on it? So, I think that the, explanations and so on for all of the items are useful. The prioritization, I think, is probably a lower, priority for me personally after going through the process. But, it does seem like these are ideas that have come from users, from input from the public, and so on, generated a series of strategies, not all of whom would be implementable by the authority or their agencies or coordinating entity, but, can guide other outreach.
Thanks, Charlie. Yeah, I didn't have anything else to add. I think the last slide is future agenda items.
Sorry, I need to go back to the slide that we were just on, because when it says January review draft plan, is that review draft plan with the PAC, the TAC, and the RTPCs, or where does that review plan go?
The TAC and the PAC.
Okay. Does it go to the RTPCs as an information item?
If you want to hear about it, we can take it as an information item.
Okay. And
but this, just so you know, Joanna, this schedule is driven by our Caltrans grant. So
yeah, I know it's tight time frame, and I think we even talked about going back out to the stakeholders and whether or not that, yeah, I think that's important. But when we go back to the PAC and the TAC, we haven't all been in the same room. Would we be in the same room? Because I think there's one big question in my mind is everyone on board to allow a nonprofit or an outside agency or the county or whoever to take on this role? Or is that the task force next step? And if we all agreed to that, I just want to make sure all the agreements are met and the, coordinating is agreement on who coordinates and it's unanimous, or if it's not, that too.
Well, I think the direction that we have given the planning group and Nelson Nygaard is just to, if there isn't consensus, to identify that in the plan where there was not consensus amongst either parts of the PAC or parts of the TAC, or between the PAC and the TAC, or and then ultimately that's going to have to be part of the decision-making process when it goes to the authority and to the Board of Supervisors.
Thank you. I like consensus if we can get there.
Well, of course we would.
Richard, Peter, we have another hand, Elaine Welch.
Hey, Elaine. Go ahead, Elaine. You're on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, I have to just kind of echo something that Debbie said earlier and often talks about, is our 30-year history in this county of not coming to agreement and having study after study after study done, and so many elements and so many parts of it certainly if the Board of Supervisors or CCTA says this is what we're going to do, you're going to have those who completely agree and are very cooperative and want to go on, and you're going to have others, as we have learned, who are not. And it has stopped us so many times from getting this done. And I guess what I'm looking at is so many of us report to boards of directors who have feelings, we're kind of out of contact with this right now, that we will need to sell on it. And so we sell them and we say, this is a great idea. And then, a year down the road, we find, for example, that something we were already doing has been given to somebody else or got cut out because it wasn't considered a priority, where to us it was a huge priority. And we are totally convinced that we have this as a priority. It's totally necessary. How is there, I guess this is too deep a question right now, but how are things like that going to be reconciled? The final authority with certain agencies is with their board of directors and not with, an authority higher than that, other than, if you will, funders and legislative kinds of issues. I don't know if that was too complex for right now, but it is a concern I have of how do you bring this all together in the end when you talk about this agreement.
Those are all very good questions.
With no answers right now. And by the way, I wasn't really looking for an answer. I just think we have to keep about this, because I remember people in parking lots with a fist drawn over the last, literally over the last plan. And we've got to get so far beyond that, or we are going to keep doing this, go around the same mountain over and over again. And those of us in the business who are getting older, I mentioned to Debbie the other day, I think when we started this, she was a teenager. Now she's 50. I'm sorry, Debbie. But, we're running out of time. And there's some of us, like we baby boomers, who are, there's people on our heels right now. We are on the heels of those who are dying, who have immediate needs. And I think we just have to get off our duff and do it. Just try the Nike school and let's do something.
So Elaine, I'm glad you appreciate you. I'm glad you remember the parking lot where the fists were drawn. I was there too.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that we don't get to that point in this case, and I don't think we will.
Tell me that wasn't West County.
I think, of course it was. Where else would it be?
Yeah, I'm so proud of us.
You know what we didn't have that last time? We didn't have this group of people together having these conversations in our fourth meeting when we only planned 3, and we're going to have one more, because they've been very good and they've been very important. And everybody's in the same room here and everybody's issues, which didn't happen last time or hasn't happened before.
Okay.
So that's a very positive step in the right direction, in my opinion.
Okay. Well, we'll see what happens. I hope it's very positive. Our intent is we will stay on board, as every other agency will, as long as it makes sense to us. When it doesn't make sense to us anymore in the part that affects us, we have to speak up. The end.
The end. Now, should we go to the last slide, Peter?
Last slide.
And you'll tell us about the parking lot later.
Yes.
Okay. So my understanding is that future agenda items was a solicitation from you, Peter, right? If there are any more.
Yeah, the last to second slide is Peter's slide.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I guess it was a misunderstanding. The slide I wanted added was the one with the question mark. Was there other
I meant I assigned it to you in the process agenda.
I think the future agenda items are already listed in upcoming activities.
Yeah.
We got them there.
Yeah.
Our January meeting is going to be to review the draft plan.
Yeah, so agenda item done, check.
Yeah.
Okay. So thanks, everyone. I guess we'll have Peter wrap it up, but that was really informative. And, we appreciate the limitations of this process and have thought about other ways of approaching this. We feel this gets closer than other approaches, but we absolutely acknowledge that there are limitations as well. We now feel like we have the pulse of where the committee is at. And with that, I'll turn it to Peter to say adieu.
Everybody have a safe holiday season, and hope for health for everybody and your families. So thank you for joining today and participating.